Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to use a modeling technique called SurfaceTools modeling. It is a bit of a hybrid technique. It is based originally on patch-based and spline modeling. This technique lends itself a little bit towards organic shapes, which of course a humanoid character is. However, in the world of game design, we have to think also in terms of keeping our polygon counts to a certain minimum. And there is a technique which we're going to include today that will show you how to lower the polygon count while still using the power of spline-based modeling. That's really kind of one of the unique little tricks that we've got for you here. And so let's go ahead and get started. This tutorial that we're going to go through today, you'll notice that we're going to start off with just a simple box. And now, for the most part, you guys are accustomed to modeling with shapes like this, and we go ahead and convert them over to editable meshes, of course, and we do some extrusions and beveling. I can do something like that, and so on and so forth, and continue to model, of course, when I want to go ahead and create something and whatever. I'm really not interested in making anything in particular here, but the idea is just to show you how you've become accustomed to modeling using the extrusion and beveling method. This method that we're going to learn today, however, lends itself, like I said, more towards organic shapes, and rather than start off with a true shape, we're going to start off with a foundation of just a simple wireframe cage, if you will, and then we will be wrapping that with a surface that creates more ripples and smooth surfaces and things like that. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. We're going to go ahead and open up this file that I've created for you guys as a start file. And you'll notice in here we've got a couple of planes set up, and they've got a couple of reference images. These images are based on, of course, the proportionally perfect man, or the ideal proportion of how man should look, at least according to Da Vinci. These were pretty much taken straight off of those drawings for the most part. You'll notice we've got a left view and a front view, which is more than all we need to worry about the torso area, so we'll be concentrating pretty much in this region of the character here. You'll notice that this isn't the most ideal art, as his arms are face downward, and he's also got his legs pretty tight together. From a modeling perspective, this can be a little bit difficult. Of course, because he is symmetrical, most characters are, the left matches the right, as you can see here. So what we'll be doing is modeling half the shape, and then we'll be mirroring the other half as we go along. Then ultimately we will convert that over into a symmetry-based shape. There is a reason why we use a mirror to begin with. One of the benefits is we can have one side be solid while the other side is transparent to see the reference art behind it, to work on it, while seeing the whole overall effect on both sides when we render it out temporarily or something like that. You'll also notice that I've got a tape measure in here. This tape measure is set up to be at about 6 foot from top to tip to the top of the character here, so that I have somewhat of a bearing of in relation to the real world. It's just easier for me to reference, so I prefer to set up my scenes that way. You'll notice that the grids are pretty much with that in mind, are about the size of a headspace. If I were to move this plane up or down, it would pretty much match the gap in between the grid lines here. One other thing I want to mention here also is that if right now I've got both these planes frozen, and that way you won't accidentally grab them as you're modeling this tutorial. You don't have to worry about accidentally moving your reference art or anything like that. Okay, so like I said, let's go ahead and get started with the actual process now. One of the first things we do as modelers, of course, is we look at our character and or whatever it is we're modeling, and we identify landmarks. Starting in the left view here, As a matter of fact, one of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to flip-flop the top and the left viewport so that it'll be easier to zoom in and out with the left and the front, since I'll be mostly using them for the most part. However, we do use the other views still, so I just prefer to use the little grab icon right here. We can adjust the viewports here. So let's go ahead and do that and flip this. So I'm just going to hit L on my keyboard, and that will convert the top viewport into a left viewport because it was the active viewport. And then I'll turn this left view into a top view by hitting T. And then I'll just zoom around everything in my viewport so that they line up. Notice that my grid lines, which these are spaced at 0, 0, 0 for a coordinate for its point of origin. So it's pretty much set up pretty well how I want the character to be. Okay, so anyway, so let's go ahead and get started then. First thing we need to do is we need to create a spline shape. So we're going to go over here and click on our Create button and go to the Shapes icon. And in the Shapes, we'll go ahead and start off with a circle. Because if you think about it, a torso is pretty much circular in its 3D space. And so we'll go ahead and create a circle here and just drag it out somewhat arbitrarily. Because we will be reshaping this circle. We're going to convert it to an editable spline and then go ahead and alter its shape somewhat and go from there. Now you'll notice over here in the perspective viewport it shows up laying down at the point of origin, which all models are created. That's why I created it over my top viewport over here, so that when I go ahead and pull it up, all my coordinates line up with the local coordinate and also with the world coordinate. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this and pull this up. And what I want to do is I want to match these shapes to the different landmarks on the body. And we're going to use these as markers. If you go along, let's go ahead and blow up the left viewport here for a second. You'll notice that if I identify, and I know his back is a little bit occluded right in here, but let's go ahead and look at the different starting points. So if we start off with the top of the neck, we've got from here to here, we've got a nice little line that we can consider chopping off for between the head and the neck. Also, he's got a bump in his throat, and then the bottom of the neck. We've also got a shoulder point in the front, and then one in the back we can use as a reference point. Moving on down, we've also got the mid part of his shoulder blade and his back to the front of his breastplate. And then just below the breast area, we've also got it where it indents there. Again, that's a major landmark point that we're identifying. We can also go to the small of the back right in here. And as I was saying here, we've also got a couple of more landmarks right below the breastplate, right below the rib cage area here, and in the stomach area. We've got one there and one also here to the beginning of the gluteus area, which of course we can use a couple of landmarks there also from here. We'll just make 4 of them to get around the corner to block it off, and then we bring that shape back. So we'll go ahead and get started. Once I've got that up there, first thing I want to do is I think I want to change the selection area or selection color of my program so that I can see this a little bit better. So the way you do this is you go to Customize, Customize User Interface. That should come up. Go to Colors, up on the tab up here. And from there we're going to switch over to the elements of, let's see here, geometry. And we'll go down here to spline vectors and change selection. Actually, that's what we want, is geometry selection. Change that color. I prefer to use like a nice bright red or a blue. Change that to blue. Go down here and say apply to colors now. And while I'm at it in here, I can also go back under the elements if you want to change up your background color. back to Elements, Viewports, and navigate down to Viewport Background. Under Color, you can click on that swatch. I prefer like a darker black. And say Apply Colors Now. And you can save this off as a preset. Call it My Colors as a user interface. We can go ahead and close that. Okay, so as you can see here, now we got our blue line that's easier to see. We'll just kind of zoom in around there using the zoom selection tool down on the lower right hand corner of the program. And just zoom around the head. And we'll just use our rotate tool, and we're going to line it up with the beginning of the back of the neck and the head here to the just under the chin where the neck begins right there. So I'm going to use my rotate tool and line that up. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over with my move tool, and you'll notice right now it's set to a local coordinate system. Now the nice thing, because we created this in our top viewport, we can switch to a local coordinate system and it will align along with that, and we'll just bring that up. It's a lot easier to move around when it's on a local coordinate. So let's just go ahead and move that to where we need it to. And we'll use the scale tool, same thing there. We can use the local coordinate, and we can pull along the Y handle here a little bit and just kind of shape that. And if we switch to the front view by hitting F on our keyboard, you'll notice that it pretty much sits right along in there, and we can size that up also using the Y handle, or the X handle, excuse me, in this viewport. And I'm just going to move it over just a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm matching it to the outline of this shape. Notice that the circle goes from here to here. What I'm doing here is actually just lining up with the outer template that I've got here with this shape here in the front view. And then in the left view, you'll notice that it also lines up with this outer edges here. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of this, and the technique here, the reason why you want to make a copy of this is so that all the coordinates of the actual splines line up. We can go overhead and go over to our modifier panel and convert this over to an edit spline, or even use an edit spline modifier, of course. Notice we have an edit spline modifier. I'll just use that for now. Of course, you can right click and turn it into an editable spline by just collapsing, or back here I'll just collapse it just to show you. Yes, as you can see, it's now an editable spline. Same thing. And if I click on vertex, you can see the vertex that are available to me. I'll go ahead and click on all 4 viewports, and you'll notice that I have one that's indicated here in yellow. That is vertex number 1. Each one of these are numbered, and this technique does require that the numbering of these vertices line themselves up, because what we'll be doing is creating, like I said, a spline cage, and then from there we'll be wrapping a material around it for a surface. So why don't we go ahead and I'm going to go back to my left viewport, hold down my shift key, and I'm going to make a copy as I go ahead and do this. Okay, so with holding shift down, I'm going to switch this over back to a view coordinate. And with shift being held down, I'm going to go ahead and copy that down around the Adam's apple area right there. And I'm going to go ahead and say copy. I'm not concerned about the name. Say OK. And go back to our scale tool, which is still on a local coordinate, and scale that up. And that seems to fit about right. Looking at zoom around the front viewport here. And that looks to be about right for the most part. Could use a little scaling. Just hold the X coordinate, pull on that. And that's about where I want that. Switch back to my move tool, which is back at a view coordinate still. Hold down shift again. And we'll go ahead and move this down to the bottom part of the neck. And make another copy. Move that over. And now I'm going to switch to the rotate tool. And I'm going to grab the outer ring here, which allows me to rotate on a view coordinate. I'll go ahead and just set that up right about 90 degrees there. Go back to my move tool and just kind of move that down and back right about there at the shoulder. And now this one, we'll go ahead and continue along with the process. I'll go ahead and switch to my front viewport now, use my scale tool. And it looks like it's a little difficult to see right here. One of the things you can do is make your transform gizmos get larger and smaller by hitting the plus or the minus keys on your keyboard. So I just hit minus there and pull on that and kick that out for the shoulder area. Right about there, it looks like. Lines up. And I'll go ahead and continue on with this process. Blow that back up. Switch to the left viewport. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Actually, I'm going to maximize this now. We'll just do one view at a time here. Switch to my move tool. And like I said, we'll zoom out a little bit. And we want to concentrate on right in here. Hold down my shift key again. And this one I want to use my rotate tool. And rotate that, because what I'm going for is this landmark here to that landmark right in the clavicle. Switch to my scale, go ahead and scale that in that viewport. Switch to my front viewport. As you can see here, we can go ahead and scale that out in the X coordinate. Pull that out to about there. Now we're not actually making the arms here, so we got to imagine this dashed kind of imaginary line coming in right here. And we'll go ahead and just kind of line that up a little bit, right like that. Switching back to the left viewport then, and my move tool. I'm going to go ahead and move this down some more. Actually, let's see here. Yeah. That one there, I think I'm going to straighten that one out a little bit. Switch my rotate. Let's actually just go right from point to point. And right about there. And there. This one here, let me just clean that up just a little bit. Kind of rotate that. Okay, the next one I'm going to shoot for, my next point is going to be down here a little bit. Let's go to the bottom of this one. Something like that. Kind of clean that up a little bit. So from there actually to the bottom of there, we'll just use that breastplate as a point there. Of course we could add one in. I'm not so concerned about that for that point right there. I'll be able to make that flow nicely. Okay, so let's switch to our front viewport now and check that out and see where that lies. Like I said, that seems to lie right within where I want it to go. Switch back to my left viewport, and like I said, I'll go ahead and move this up using the pan tool. I'm going to shoot for right here, the peak point of the shoulder blade to the front of the breastplate. Hold down my shift key to make a copy again. Just kind of set that about mid-level and say OK to my copy. Switch to rotate. Rotate that in there. And then switch to my scale on a local coordinate. Okay, I'm just going to scale this out and move it a little bit. Something like that. Go ahead and hold down shift to make another copy. This one's going to go right below the breastplate. It's going to sit right about where the bottom of the actual shoulder blade goes. Switch to my scale. Move. Something like that. Use my pan tool and pan up a little bit. Navigate down to the rest of the body here. And move this with a shift to the rib cage area. I'll say OK. And I'm going to need to scale that, so I'll just center it up beforehand. Just kind of scale that out. Of course, you can go into vertex mode and you can move your vertices manually also, if you just want to use the move tool. However, I'm a lazy person. I prefer using the scale. It doesn't really make much of a difference. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to skip down to right down below the stomach area here. Pan this up a little bit more. And go ahead and hold down my shift key. And this is going to come from just below his rear end right there, or his gluteus maximus. Rotate that 90 degrees or thereabouts, or 45 I should say. And set that right about there. I'm going to pan this up a little bit more so I can see what I'm doing. Rotate a little bit more. Right about there. And use my scale tool. And pull that in. So again, my dots line up in there. And then I'll make two more. These will be for the pelvic region in here. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the rest of these shapes that I have currently in the front viewport. So let's take a look and see what we got going on so far here. So as you can see, I've got a couple more that need to be scaled out. E and X. Kick this out for the chest area. This one also. And I'm going to actually move both of those over just a little bit. And this one too. And scale it out just a wee bit. Right there. Okay, and let's see what else we got going on here for the hip area. That one seems to be about right. So as you can see, it starts to taper in right around his pelvic region in here. So that's where we want to actually, why I wanted to clean that stuff up first. So let's go back to our left view. And I'm going to select my bottom circle. This should be number 8. And I'm going to go ahead and hold down my shift key and move it down. And this is going to go approximately from where his rear end is to about where his wrist is. I'll use my rotate. Rotate that around just to get approximately the same type angle there. move that down into place. Maybe a little bit more rotating for finesse. About like that. And switch to a scale. And I'm going to go ahead and scale this down just a little bit here. About like from the wrist again to about where his lower part of his gluteus maximus is. And then we'll switch to our move tool. We'll make one more copy. But before we do that, let's go to the front viewport and scale that there also. Scale that down. And this last one here, go back to the left viewport, use my move tool. And just make a copy downward. And this one I'm going to rotate and make flat. And then scale it in quite a bit, because if you ever looked, it tapers in right there, and that's going to be the bottom connecting portion. So I'm going to scale that down quite a bit. And then just get off that so you can see that. And then switch to my front viewport. And pan up just a little bit. And as you can see here, now it looks like it's sitting a little bit below it, and that's fine. We can adjust all that later on, but for right now that's about where I want this stuff to be. Next we'll be adding some segments to connect all these splines into one giant spline shape. Now we can start at the bottom or the top with our shape. Since we had our first shape, circle 1, why don't we go ahead and start with that. If you hit H on your keyboard, you can choose circle 1 from the name selection set that comes up, and choose select in the panel. And then over on the right hand side under the modifier panel, which again is the blue macaroni, we can navigate down to the geometry rollout, and you will see attach. You also have attach multiple. However, be very careful with that, because we want to attach these in order so that when we create a cross section that it connects it properly. Now we do have a cross section connector here. However, I want to show it to you as a modifier because there's some tricks that we can do with that under its settings that it has uniquely as a modifier. So click on your attach button. And what we want to do is we want to attach these one at a time. You can either do this by name and hit H on your keyboard and choose circle 2 and just double click on it, and then continue on circle 3, or you can choose pick, of course, and 4 until you get all 10 of them in there. And again, you have to do this in order so that they all become one. Now circle 1, if I turn off the attach button, is now one giant object. Now I'm just going to move this around so you can see that it's one giant spline shape, even though they are separated. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to my modifier list and click on that, and in the drop down arrow or the panel next to it, we can choose under the object space modifiers. We have a cross section modifier called or a modifier called cross section modifier. Go ahead and click on that, and you'll see that it will actually connect all of your spline shapes into a cage, if you will. And we want to go ahead and change up the settings over here because we can have it differentiate between linear or smooth, so that it smooths the curvatures between each one of those shapes, or that it's more rigid. In this case, we want to choose smooth. So go ahead and change that, and you'll see we get a much more smoothed shape or an outline pattern of our character here. Okay, with that done now, we're going to go ahead and add a couple of more things. We'll go to our modifier list again, and this time we want to navigate all the way down to the bottom, and you should find a modifier called surface. If you click on the surface modifier, that should add geometry or surface to your geometry. Now here's part of the key part of this. When you add this, there are some parameters under the surface modifier that you need to adjust in order to make this lower a high polygon model. This is how we control the dynamics of the settings or the thresholds of this. So what we want to do is we want to change the threshold to 0. So drop that all the way down to 0. And then under the patch topology, this is a really critical part of this, needs to be dropped all the way down to 1. So we're going to have 1 in there, and you'll notice we get a much more rigid shape in here. It also reduces the polygon count. Now the benefit to this, of course, is that we can go ahead and just turn some edges, and we pretty much have a shape already going for our model here. If I go ahead and rotate around, take a quick look, it does need some cleanup. We can see the rear end of the characters isn't exactly shapely. We can continue and clean that up. You can of course add more spline shapes in there to add more detail in that region if you want. However, before you do that, you can't just go sticking a spline in there. You need to actually have them laid out in order beforehand. So that's something to consider before you actually commit to your modeling process of combining and attaching. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and convert this over to an editable mesh. Of course, you can leave your history stack intact under your modifier list and just use an edit mesh modifier at this stage if you wish, which is my preference. By doing this, if I click on vertex, you'll see how many vertices we actually have in here. Now this is a low poly model. One of the nice things is that we can work with the simple geometry that we have here and just kind of clean up our imagery. Now there is one other thing I like to do, and that is make my object invisible. So I'm going to just get out of the sub-object mode on the right hand side and right click on my model, and in the object properties in the quad menu, this is all a quad menu that pops up. You'll find one that says Object Properties. If I click on that, I can check under the Display Properties in the left-hand side of the panel that pops up and check See-Through. I can, of course, also uncheck Show Frozen in Gray, which may help me later on if I decide to freeze this model or not. So I might as well set it up right now. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And you can see now I've got a transparent version of my model. I can go ahead and go back to Vertex mode and do some model manipulation, and which I will go ahead and do right now. Starting with his rear end area, I'm just going to grab a couple of these vertices and using my move modifier, go ahead and move these out and just kind of make some kind of adjustments for him. Just kind of bring this back, and right in this area I'll go ahead and bring this stuff up like that. Okay, I'll just move this one, just kind of set that in line to create a nice little curvature. As you can see, we've got some kind of rear end going on here. Just clean this geometry up again. Something like that. And again, I'm just looking for a rough shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, but of course we can perfect it if we choose to be picky. And for academic purposes, it looks about right where I want that. Of course, over in the right-hand panel, I've got some adjustments I want to make also, and also over here on the left-hand side, I can do some other type of model cleanup. You'll notice I've got two rows here right next to each other. So what I want to do is I want to grab this lower row here. And you got to be careful about this. There's two ways you can go about it. You can either add to your selection, which is my preferred way. And I'm going to go ahead and move that down. I can use my scale tool. And we'll use a local coordinate system on a parented object. Let's see if that works. Nope, that's not going to do the trick for me. So, actually it might. Nope, that's not going to do it. So I'm just going to go back to View, Common Center Point. That'll do the trick. I just want to bring that in a little bit. I got some other vertices in here I want to move. Again, I'm holding down my control key as I add to my selection here. And I'll bring that down. Something like that, so I can create a taper in there. Of course, I can clean some of this up also. Using my rotate or move, it doesn't really matter which methodology you use. Okay, so that about shapes that up for the most part. Go ahead and change over to the top here and just check the top of the character. Maybe do a little bit more cleanup around the shoulder blade area. Just kind of kick those out. So it's nice and rounded. And then of course up in the neck area you'll see it kind of pinches off in the back. I want to clean that up. Just by grabbing these two upper vertices and just kind of moving that over. There we go. Okay, now I can concentrate on the front viewport, and I'll maximize the view this time so we can see what's going on. Looking down here in the pelvic region, we do have some crossover, as you can see. This is a concern, so I want to grab a couple of these vertices and make sure I grab the right ones. Can kick those back so they taper in where they need to go. Something like that. Okay. And can go ahead and one more thing I'm going to do with this model now at this point is I'm going to right click over it so I can see it a little bit better. And I'm going to go to my object properties again and uncheck edges only. That way I can see all the edges in here. It kind of makes it a little bit easier to see. And I can go ahead and grab these vertices across the center here and use my scale tool. Kind of scale those in. Grab the next group. Same thing here. Kind of scale that in. And just get some general overall shape. Okay, at this point we're about ready to split the model in half. That one's kind of bugging me a little bit there. Later on we can weld some of this stuff off. There. Okay, so we've got our general torso. Let's take a good overall look and see where we're at this stage. Now, as I said, one of the benefits of using the mirroring system is I can have half solid and half see-through. This is a good start, so why don't we go ahead and take a break right here. Okay, let's concentrate a little bit on that crotch area a little bit. Before we do that, okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and delete half of this body. So while we're in vertex mode here, I'm going to go ahead and make a selection on the right half of the character in the front viewport. Be careful not to select those middle vertices at this stage. and go ahead and hit delete. And we're going to zoom in around the crotch area just to make sure we got everything we want deleted there. Seems to be the case. However, there's always that errant one. As you can see here in the back, there is a dashed line here indicating that there is another one floating out there. So I'm just going to hit delete now, and that should take care of it. Just select that region just to make sure it looks clean to me. Okay. We do have some cleanup here in the crotch area to do, to take care of, and we'll go ahead and zoom out just a little bit while we're here. And I'll go ahead and grab this lower portion and go ahead and move that up just a little bit. And we'll move this up and in a little bit in here too. Something like that. And just separate these a little bit so I can create some definition as I make some curves. I grab all these, kind of kick that in like that, and I'll zoom down here. Take a look. Oops, that last one needs to be staying out there on the hips. Go ahead and move that up. And let's go ahead and move this in a little bit more like that. So we've got some curvature going on like that. Okay, before we go any further, let's go ahead and mirror copy our halves off here. I'm going to go up here to the mirror button, click on that, and you'll see it makes me a right hand, it flips a copy in the X coordinate. And I'm going to choose reference as a copy here and say OK. Now with this reference copy, it automatically throws me into its sub-object group. I'm going to right click on it and go to Object Properties and uncheck See-Through. Like I said, this will allow me to see a solid half along with a transparent half together when I work on this model. I prefer working on the transparent half, so I'm going to go click back on Circle 1. And now I'm back active in here. You'll notice that it's got a mirrored copy because everything is in bold on the right hand side here. Let's go ahead and zoom down here a little bit, make some more adjustments. And I'm still not comfortable about that. We'll adjust that as we go and kick that up a little bit. And make some other adjustments in here just to kind of shape up this body. In this case, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. While I'm at it, I'm going to maximize the front viewport. Move this down. And just create a little bit more shapeliness to him. I'm going to bring, like this vertex. I'm pretty comfortable with that one, I guess. Let's bring these down. Right about there. I'm going to bring this one like that. And we'll use that as our taper for that little hip region right in there. And I'll bring this over just a little bit. Just to create that rib cage area effect. And let's see, what else can I do here? We've got an errant vertex floating out here. Set that in line right there. And that looks about right. Okay, that's about right for that region. I've got some crossover here in the chest area, as you can see, so I'm going to grab these and move them back. Just kind of stitch them up and flatten that out in here. Not sure how that exactly happened. Not too concerned about that, because once I put a symmetry modifier on there, it'll clean that up. take a look further up the torso. Again, we got some crossover here, so let's just try and clean that up if we can a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and make some adjustments to the neck area here, kicking these couple of vertices out, shaping up the shoulders. Something like that. Go ahead and bring these out just a little bit. And let's bring this out just a tad bit more. Something like that. Yeah, that looks about right. Maybe bring these two out just a little bit. There we go. And we'll bring this back in. Okay, that looks about right. Next, what we're going to do is we've got too many vertices in the under the pectoral area, so we're going to target weld a couple of these in order to optimize the model. We want to switch over to the perspective view, and I'll just hit P on my keyboard, and that'll allow me to do that. And I'll go ahead and zoom around that region. And I'm going to turn on my ignore back facing button, and let's go ahead and do a little bit of target welding. I'm going to rotate this just a little bit so I've got a better angle in this, what I'm actually after here. As I said, it's just under the pec area, so we're going to take like this vertex right here, and then we're going to target weld it up to right about there. So we'll go over here to the right hand panel, navigate down to where it says target weld, click on that, and we'll go ahead and pull that up. Don't worry about where the vertex is going, just follow your mouse, and once you get over the vertex you want, just go ahead and click on it, and it should weld that area up for you. And that should reduce the polygon count for that region right in there. And next, what we're going to do is we're going to drag the other vertices along that edge up to the vertices in the same manner, so that you end up something like above. So I'm just going to go along and I'm going to grab all of these from that region right there and reduce them by bringing them up. So I go along, I'm going to pull this one up to there, take this one and bring it up to there, and that'll reduce the chest area in here, you'll notice. Now I have to navigate around to the back side, and this is why we chose the perspective view. Make sure you stay in line with that. You'll notice we've got some more we need to do over here. So I'll take this one, target weld it up to here, and this one, and target weld it up to there. And that'll reduce the count in that region in there for my chest area. That should clean the model up pretty much. Let's switch back to a front viewport. And again, just do a little bit more refining here on our model, just so we've got a little bit of shapeliness. I've got it kind of squared down here, so I'm going to change where this vertex is located. Turn off my target weld, and go ahead and move that up where that other vertex was located to kind of create this V shape in here for a taper for the chest. Notice that it kind of dips down now. So that's kind of what I'm after, to create that over the chest region a little bit. Just kind of clean that up, and that looks good right about there to me. So we're just going to adjust this to the guide just a little bit more. I'd say that looks pretty good. Let's take this one here and move that up to kind of create that little curvature right there. Put that one right there. This one, of course, can go in line to create more of a curve. This one can taper in just a little bit and probably even go down a hair. There, now we got a nice overall shape. Kick this kind of in a little bit more, right like that. Okay, next we're going to switch to the left view and we're going to nudge the vertices under the sternum to follow the guide a little bit better. So let's go to the left view, and again under the sternum area we'll go ahead and make some adjustments to that and just make sure that it conforms to the overall shape this way too. So let me just zoom out here and move it up just a little bit. Because you can see we've got some adjustments we could probably be doing in here. This vertex probably needs to come down. Again, following that around on the curvature. Let's take this one, kick that out for his belly. Maybe even bring that up to about like that. Take this one, bring that up like that. Take this and move that down. And again, we can adjust for his derriere. Just kind of flatten that out a little bit. Don't forget, we've got our ignore back facing on, but it shouldn't matter because the other side is being mirrored. We can go ahead and move this one, curve that up. So as you can see, I'm looking for creating a little bit more smoothing going on here now. That one looks alright. Let's go ahead and move this one up just a little bit. And this one, something like that. Well, that's the one that curves for the breast, so you got to be careful about that. Don't forget about what you saw in the front viewport. Again, we're really only mostly concerned about this area right there. And back a little bit. Create a little bit more curvature in there. Okay, that looks about how I want it to look for the most part. Let's see here. I'm going to take this vertex and actually kick it down. A couple of these I'm going to push up just so I got a flatter area in there. So what I'm trying to do is flatten this area out here. Something like that. There. That looks pretty good. For the most part. Of course, I can continue shaping this up and finessing it as we go. Later on, we will cut a leg out of this, and we will also cut an arm out of this region right in here. What we're going to do is go up to the neck, and when we surfaced this, it created a lot more vertices up in the neck area, so we're going to remove some of these extra rings that we have in here and reduce the count down to just simply the top and the bottom one right in here. Even though we did made one for the Adam's apple in there, we'll go ahead and reduce that one also. So we'll go ahead and use the target row and target weld this second row of vertices right in here. So let's turn the target weld back on. Again, if you just want to double check, make sure ignore back facing is on. And go ahead and start with the front of the neck and go up one. And you should be able to just do this relatively quickly. way to the back, and that should take care of that. Basically, we're getting rid of that extra row of edges that make up the middle of the neck. Our model is low poly and won't need to bend in his neck so much in that area, so we don't have to worry so much about that. Okay, that looks pretty good right in there. We got a nice reduction for that. We got a little bit of an Adam's apple going on. I can move these couple of vertices back, I guess, just to shape it up just a little bit more. Okay, so there's our head area. That looks pretty good for the most part. Okay, this next step is going to involve using the cut tool and excuse me. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a cut right down the center of the chest area, and we want to do this in the, if you go over to the modifier panel and navigate down to your sub-object groups, and we want to do this in the polygon mode. So click on that, and if you navigate down you will find something called the cut tool. Okay, and we want to switch over to our perspective view. Is probably the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to hit P on my keyboard and go to my perspective view and rotate around so I can see the front of the torso here. And I'm going to start all the way at the top of the neck, and I'm going to cut along. And what we're going to do is we're going to create that little divot for his chest area in there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all the way down to about the midsection. We're going to end up cutting right about in here. So it'll go to there. So I'm going to use my cut tool. I'm just going to click right up here, and you got to put it over an edge. And I'll just go along and make a cut. And you should be able to just drag this down like that, and you'll notice that it will create my tapered inward like that. Now, depending on the angle that you're at in your perspective view, will depend on how wide of a cut area that actually makes that. That's a little bit on the wide side in my opinion, but it'll work. It'll do just fine. So you'll notice now we've got a nice region in here that's cut for his chest area, and it basically ends right about where I want it to. I could probably have that cleaned up just a little bit more. So I'm going to undo that cut and redo it one more time here. Do it a little bit closer. I'm going to come down to about here. And click, and that looks a little bit better. Divides across that edge in there. And I can just right click to end the process. Okay, that looks about right for me. I'll go ahead and do some cleanup here. Go ahead and move some of those new vertices I made over, for example. Just grab those right down like that. Now notice I wanted to be careful I didn't grab the ones right next to it. And yours may not look quite like this, but I'm just going to move that in closer so I've got a bit more definition in that little dipping area right there. And that looks about right. I'm actually going to continue this down and make one more cut here. I'm not happy with the way this line turned out. I want to bring this down a little bit further, I think. So, in order to do that, I've got a couple of choices. I can either undo that, which I think I will do. It's probably the easiest. Go back to my cut tool. Of course, the other choice is to continue cutting and then weld those together, but I prefer to use this method. So use my cut tool, turn that on, and I'm just going to navigate down. I think it's right to, let's go right to here. And then I want to bring this over. And then I'll click that. Okay, now just to make sure, let's just check our vertices. It looks like we got something funny going on right here. That looks about right. Go ahead and adjust this. Pull that over. That looks a lot better. See, I like that much better. However, I do need to move some of these over. Now you'll notice that this time I'm actually moving them one at a time. And I can cheat here just a little bit. Okay, so I've got that cleaned up for the most part. What was throwing me off here is these edges that you can see that are visible in there. Now I've got a nice dip for the chest in there. Okay, next what we're going to do is take a look at the left viewport, and we'll use the cut tool again and create more definition along with this. So let's switch to our left view, and you can see those vertices that we created. We're going to have to clean those up a little bit. So while we're in vertex mode, why don't we go ahead and clean those up just by moving those out. Alright, just making some adjustments here. Okay, that looks about right. Okay, that looks just fine with me. I'm going to switch to my perspective view, of course, and examine him. So rotate around here. And you'll notice that right around the, in the left viewport, the pectoral muscles stick way out. If you look at that, we can, of course, have it stick away from where the stomach muscles is, right in here, and we can create some of that definition. What you talking about, Willis? Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go to polygon mode, and like I was saying, we can create some definition around the pectoral area where it sticks out from the stomach. And to do this, I'll go ahead and rotate around here, and we'll create a little bit of definition for the stomach area. What we're working on here then is going to be, let me go ahead and move a couple of vertices, make this look a little more defined, I guess. Move this one up just a little bit. And so we're talking about what's going to be right within go ahead and move those down a little bit like that. These right across in here. We're going to create a little bit more definition across there. So let me go ahead and go to polygon mode, and select that region right there. So in polygon mode, I'm going to select all across here so you can see this. That's not what I have in mind. What's going on? Oh, because we're in DirectX mode, we're not going to be able to see the invisible edges. That's one of the problems with DirectX, and you can set that up under Preferences. If you go to Viewports and configure your driver if you've got DirectX on, let's see here. I think that needs to be set to turn off use triangle strips, I believe. Let's take a look. Nope. Let's see if I turn off ignore back facing, if that does it. That's strange. Okay, so anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut that's going to come across from here to there and then in. So using my cut tool still, I'll start right there, go to right there, and then bring it right back down to there, and then right click to end that. So just to create some definition in that area for the muscle group. Of course, that looks about right. I'll go ahead and adjust the vertices a little bit more. These new ones here. Move those up a little bit. And these, I'm going to target weld that one off right there. Target. Right there, just to clean that up, just again to create a little bit more definition in that region right in there. And let's see here, I'm also going to do the same up under here, which is actually where it should have been, shouldn't it? It's not where I wanted that cut. I'm sorry. Let's go back. Okay, so we're going to make a cut here, and we're going to make it under the pectoral region in here. So what we're talking about is actually going to be this chest area right in here. We create a little bit more definition and cut across from here to here. So we'll go to polygon mode, and I'm going to use my cut tool. Start right there, go to there. Whoops, forgot to turn the cut tool on. So we'll start right there, go to there, and we'll bring this all the way over to there. And I'll right click to end the process. As you can see, now I've created an extra region in here, and you can see this probably in the left view. We've created an extra amount of detailing in this region right in here over the chest area. Now I can go and do some more cleanup here again. Maybe move those down, for example. And here I've got where I started them to. I need to target weld those vertices together. So I'll turn on my target weld. Just move that over and clean that up a little bit. That will give me that extra region of detail right in there. And of course I can work with that as I need it. So why don't we go ahead and switch views here yet again. Go back to the front view. And it's starting to shape up pretty nice for the most part. I'm not so concerned about the top of the neck up there. Next, what we need to do is target weld the vertices that make up the top of the pectoral muscle to the row of the vertices above them. What we're talking about is this region right in here, top of the pec muscles being welded up. So with my target weld still on, I can go ahead and just drag these up. And again, this will reduce the poly count a little bit. Don't forget about the back side of your model. And we'll go ahead and do that, and then I will switch to a perspective view and rotate around and get the back side. And you can see where those dip down right in here, and I've only got two left, so I'll go ahead and bring those up. Okay, and that will clean that part of the model up. Let's take a look at this and rotate back. That looks a little bit better. It creates more of a pectoral muscle region in there. Once we did that, then we're going to move the vertices that run up the top of the back down a little to match the guide and follow that a little bit better. So what we're talking about is in the back area. Let's go back to the left view. And these in here, as you can see, this has now been simplified a little bit. So we're just going to grab these back vertices that make up the extreme back and go ahead and taper these down to create more of a V shape across the back. So I'll bring that down. I can bring this one down also. And let's take a look at the back. So let's go ahead and switch back to perspective and rotate around. And that's about what I want, something like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, pretty much that's the way it should look. Let's see here. Next, what we're going to do is, at least if we wanted more detail, we could of course use textures on this. And that should about do it for right now. So let's take a look and see what we've got for our character here. As we can see, we're a little skinny over here, and we've also got a floating vertex. Let's find out where this guy belongs. Let's go to left view. Okay, he belongs right up there. Can't move him up or down. No, he definitely belongs there. So let's go to the front view and see where he's at. And this is the way you can check for floating vertices. Nope, and he needs to go right about there. But we do have one in the front view that's also floating. Let's check that in the left. Go back to front. And let's just move that out, something like that, and you'll notice that it created a dashed line, so I'm going to move that out also. Go back to left view, and just kind of clean this up a little bit, like that. Oops, the target weld was on. Turn that off. Okay, so let's move a couple of these vertices around. Something like that. That looks pretty good. And so let's do a quick render of this and see what we've got so far. And other than the seaming, which I'm not worried about at this stage of the game, that looks about what I would expect out of this character. Of course, there's some edge turning we can do in here and clean this model up and further refine him a little bit. And we'll go ahead and do that in the next couple of stages in here. We'll go ahead and take a break. Okay, why don't we go ahead and clean up this model a little bit. There's a few things we need to do, some edge turning. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to pull this down here. Look at my two viewports, and there's some things that I could do, some edges that could be turned. to make some adjustments so that he's a little bit more naturalistic in the shape here. So let's go to edge turn mode, edge, turn on the turn button, and we can go ahead and turn a couple of these edges so that they are more conducive to what our needs are here. I can try that. That kind of helps out a little bit for the chest area. Of course, if you're making a female, that would be beneficial also. By turning that one down, I think that that will also add benefit to it. Now, I'll be honest with you, this is a hit and miss process, so you may see over the next couple of moves me doing and undoing a couple of steps along the way here. But for the most part, I'm pretty pleased with what I've got going on here. Let's take a look in the perspective view. Just maximize that. And okay, so one of the things you'll notice is that that sternum area is pushed in a little bit. Let's go back to the left view and focus on that a little bit so you can see where my cut was, my two cuts. Those are the new edges since they were selected. And before I actually do anything, let's go ahead and pull those out a little bit. And let's go to vertex mode because I see it pulled out a couple of vertices for me. Push those back in. And go to the front view. What that did is it just created a little bit more definition in here. We can actually grab this whole center line and zoom around that. Grab this whole center line right here. Switch back to the left. Let's make sure we got them all first. We may need to turn off. Yep, okay, ignore back facing is off. Okay, looks like I've got them all now. So let's go back to the left view and let's just push those back in just a little bit. Now, I guess I don't want the back, so I did want to ignore back facing on. So I'm just going to deselect the back half and push these in just a wee bit. There. Okay, let's take a look at that in the perspective view. See what we got. Should have created a little divot in there. Now render that, take a look. There, that looks a lot better now. I know there's a seam there. Again, we will get rid of the seam, but we will leave that dip in there. And the way we do that is I'm going to go ahead and delete off the transparent half of this model. So that's circle 1. Just hit delete. And I'm going to grab the other half, and I'm going to add a symmetry modifier to this because it is solid. And you'll notice at first it disappears. All you need to do is tell it to flip the axis, and you should get a complete model. As long as it's being seamed along that mirror, it should seam that up also. Go ahead and hit F9, and that creates a much smoother shape for me. Again, there's some more cleanup I can do. It comes to a point here in the penis area, pelvic area. I can go ahead and clean that up just by moving these vertices out. And so let's go back down to vertex mode and turn on our show end result. Rotate around to the other side, so on the side we're actually working on. Grab these vertices right here and pull those out to create a little bit more width area in there. That looks a little bit better. Let's rotate that around. Yeah, much better. Same thing in the rear end area here. We can grab like these vertices. Oops, I always forget I'm working on the other half over here. These right here. Rotate that back, make sure I don't want to grab that other one up there, and just move them out. Maybe that one not so far, something like that. Like that. Just to create a little bit of a tail area in there for my character. Let's rotate back around, take a look at the front again. I'd say I'm pretty well pleased with this process. Now you'll notice up here under the neck there's a couple of gaps missing. Yours may or may not have this artifacting going on. It's really not that big of a deal because we're going to end up deleting these faces in here anyway. So you can either do that now or later on. Last but not least, I just want to clean this up. I noticed that this was sticking out a little bit. I just want to round that off just a hair. Check in the front to confirm what I'm achieving here. Go to the left, make sure I'm not messing anything up that way either. Maybe stick that back down. Something like that. Okay, and as I was saying here in the left view, I'm just going to make a couple more adjustments here. Just because I'm persnickety as I go about doing this, is just kind of my process. There is no, again, hard and fast rules to any of this stuff. And you just kind of tweak along as you go. Okay, that looks about right what I want for my character. There's a few of these edges I can continue turning, of course, to help refine my modeling, and go ahead and mess around with that a little bit. Whoops. Edge mode, and I suppose I gotta go over to the other side, which is now the right hand side. See how that kind of peaks at a tweaked angle right there? I think I'm going to actually adjust some of that. Just by grabbing these vertices, turn on my ignore back facing, grab these, and let's just go ahead and move those out. Maybe not. A little difficulty with my mouse here. I think that's alright. I'm going to leave that alone. Okay, see what we got so far. Last but not least, I put a mesh smooth modifier on it, take a gander at it. Now mesh smoothing, ew. There we go. Sucks.